Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan.
You're welcome. I'm not sure I answered the breakdown recycling question, but if that person wants more info,
yeah,
it in or
let's go ahead and switch to gallery view and have a little talk story about some of these questions that have come up in chat. Great. So let's see. If you had a question that came up first, actually, before anything else, I'm going to unmute everybody, and I'd like to give Megan a round of applause before we do questions. I also want to keep you unmuted for a second.
Woo, thank you.
You're welcome.
While you're unmuted, if you have a question that you asked in the chat, that you can go ahead and ask it directly now, or I can read questions out of the chat too if you're feeling shy. Anybody have a question?
Oh, there's so many.
There's quite a few in there. Some of them are just
that's awesome. I can start at the top.
Yeah, let's just start from the top.
So what advancements are being made in recycling plastics? So it is still, it's an ongoing effort, and Fenna will be able to speak more from like the post-consumer recycled products and things like what you're throwing into the mixed recycling bin. Because pollution and marine debris is so mixed, it's a mixture of various different polymers, and oftentimes it is it's contaminated by the biofouling. So the aquatic hitchhikers, we've got bryozoans and gooseneck barnacles and such bacterial mats growing this. So it's not always like the highest quality, highest grade plastics to recycle. However, Parley has been working for a long time to try to recycle plastics. SandCloud has taken a fair amount of debris. So we're hoping that there will be some innovation in the future that we can continue to at least mix some of the plastic pollution we're finding on our beaches and in our soil with cleaner, sorted, post-consumer recycled bin recycling efforts.
Can I ask a question before we go on to the list? You use the term turn off the tap. Can you explain? I know what the analogy you're using there is, but can you explain that, what you mean by that?
Sure, yeah, totally. It's the idea that, let's say, for example, our bathtub is overflowing a water leak. The first thing you do is not starting to bail the bathtub that's overflowing. You turn off the tap. So you're turning off the water spigot. The analogy is the water is a plastic pollution and the bathtub is our ocean. So really, if all you're doing is conducting beach cleanups, it is like a great pat on the back, and you are making a difference from the wildlife that is utilizing that habitat. Unless you're actually working to reduce the sources that are coming in, it really is a Band-Aid. And it's just going to be an ongoing problem. And so in addition to removing debris, we really need to start preventing it to begin with, and just being a little bit more mindful in our plastics usage across the board.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot. Good question.
We talked about the biodegrading. How often are the cleanups? Well, right now they're postponed, but usually how often do you do that?
Yeah. We are endeavoring to have one big community cleanup a month. However, if there was a school group or a community group that wanted to do a clean, we've done some groups for Girl Scout troops or paddling canoe clubs, then we can arrange like a smaller cleanup for those groups. Like I said, last year we had 71 cleanups, and that's including our net patrols with the beach cleanups. But it's at this point more than once a week on average. We have had to postpone our efforts since March 16th, but we are hoping in the coming months that we might at least be able to start coordinating cleanups where it's like a bring your own 4-wheel drive, come with the people you live with sort of style cleanup only, until we can safely transport people in our two 4-wheel drive again.
Excellent. Is plastic harmful, or does it degrade the quality of soils?
Really good question. There was, excuse me, 1 second. The Wahine who lives in Waimea, Cassandra Phillips, who wrote the book called Ocean Plastic, she was the ghostwriter for Captain Charlie Moore. She actually did a study using plastic pellets as orchid media for growing orchids, and found polyurethane worked really well, and the plants did well. So I think, there has been studies to show that it is changing the microbial composition both in seawater and in soil, and so it's producing the microbial communities in the ocean, for example, are now potentially producing less oxygen because of the amount of plastics in the ocean, and the plastics inhibiting some of this biological activity. And so I would presume the same thing is true for the soil, but then there might also be these studies, these one-off studies where for that particular type of orchid and that growing media, that it was okay. So I'm not sure. I know there's been some research there, and it's something that we can look into, but it's a good question. Something that you could probably do a little field test on.
Yeah, that would be an interesting little independent project. What are the economic impacts of marine debris?
That's a really challenging question. Like, how much do you value one coral head? How much do you value, did something only have a value when it's got a protected, if it's a protected species, it's what we have used in the past are the cleanup costs. So, for example, Department of Transportation, and how much extra money it takes for them to remove styrofoam containers or plastic bags on the side of the road so they don't kind of fill up the ditches and prevent the wastewater from going down. But there hasn't been an economic study related to debris that I have seen published since 2005. So there's another great study. I did some minor kind of op-ed questions about even just like cleanup costs, and it really depends on what you're doing. So who's to say how much do you value, like, if somebody doesn't die, but you're now no longer able to reproduce because you were exposed to so much phthalates because you grew up eating everything in plastic packaging your whole life, how much is that worth? I don't know. I'm not an economist. But
I think
it's something to consider, and I don't think. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say it's also worth thinking about the concept of ecosystem services, which we haven't really covered in this class because this isn't a science class; it's a social science class. But ecosystem services are all the things that the natural world does for us that have a value. So not the goods that we get from the natural, but all like pollination and photosynthesis. And coral, for example, protects our coastlines from storms. So there's a lot of things that nature does that humans benefit from. There was an analysis, it's a little old at this point, but they looked at all the ecosystem services, a broad estimate of it, and it was 3 times the gross domestic product of all countries in the world was the value of the ecosystem services that nature is doing for free. So that's something to think about. It's hard to convert some of this stuff into dollars and cents. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, they haven't. If they haven't done that, they haven't done that recently for marine debris. They have done that for coral reefs, and even just considering how much of our economy on this island is based on ocean activities, whether that be like tourism angle or commercial fishing operations. And so at some level, marine debris is going to get to a point where it will start negatively impacting those industries as well.
Next
Good
question.
question.
you talked about the vacuum. Are there any other technologies that remove microplastics from the oceans before marine life can consume it? Wasn't there some big like net thing that was catching plastics?
There's been some things that I think they were going to launch, like one of those bin systems in the Olivine, ones like in water in the harbors. I can't remember what they're called. It was out of in Australia. I mean, there's a great big giant ocean cleanup project that's going to, you know, clean the world's oceans and for gobs and gobs of money and using lots of plastic. They're microplastics, not so much. And the issue is, it's like, how do you strain an area for the ocean cleanups, for example? How do you strain an area and only get plastic, don't get plankton?
Right.
And so even when we were using the vacuum, you know, it's something you have to analyze. We're not going to use like the marine debris machine, Ho'ola One. We're not going to use that at a beach that turtles are nesting, or at least not during the season. We're not going to use that on a beach where we've got a lot of ghost crab. And so there's different, you know, even restoration efforts and trying to clean up, you have to think of the various different ramifications and some of the negative, some of the non-target impacts that might happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, microplastic is challenging, and the more we're learning, the more frightening it gets. There's been research published more recently from SLIC, so these kind of, when you look, it looks like a current line off the coast of West Hawaii where fishermen a lot of times go trolling through, and then they're concentrated areas where not only do our larval fishes and our sports fishing populations are growing up there, but concentrate microplastic particles. And so they're finding heaps of microfibers. So these are probably very local things that are washing out of our plastic clothes when we wash them and getting into the wastewater treatment facility and still going in the ocean because they're just so small.
Right.
And so the solution is prevention. Cleanup is expensive, and it also has impacts.
Yeah, turning off the tap versus the failing. It looks like those are our last two content questions, but I do have, there's a comment from Elian who would like to participate when things open back up. And Josefina wants to know if there's an office on the Kona side and who to contact.
We are very small but mighty, and we don't actually have an office. So my home office is always my home office and our office on the side. We've got team members in Alehu and Puna and Hilo, and a couple of us on the Kona side. So I'm happy to provide my email and phone number, and feel free to follow up, Elian, or happy to add you to our volunteer list, and if anyone wants to meet or talk more, we're open to it.
Great. I had another question that's not plastic specific. Can you talk about Inculin Pools?
Talk about Inculin Pools? I would love to talk about Inculin Pools. How are you then?
Is that too far off topic?
Not at all. I love me Inculin Pools. Here, let me pull up a picture. Just because pictures are such more fun. But Inculin Pools, does everyone know what an Inculin Pool is?
I think we can assume some people don't, probably.
Okay. I want to show you a picture, but I'm not that quick. Well, shucks. Never mind. You can Google it. But an Inculin Pool is it's a kind of like a landlocked body of water. So it comes from the Greek word inkulo. So it kind of sounds like I'm botching up alkaline, the word like for alkaline or basic pH, but it isn't. It's inculine, and they are systems like local examples. So most of you are on the Hilo and Puna side, yeah? Like
We
hot ponds are.
There's Palamanui students in here too, so we have Kona side students here.
Oh,
too.
sweet. Well, Hawaii Island has the largest concentration of inculin ecosystems in the world, and most of them are on the West Hawaii coastline, and some of them are also in East Hawaii. But these are these bodies of water that are near the ocean, but they're connected through porous lava rocks and tubes and tunnels with the ocean. And so they've got freshwater sources from Upmalka and marine water sources, seawater from the ocean coming together, and they actually will fluctuate with the tide. And so there's pools, for example, common ones here, I guess, like Makalavena or Mahaiulas on the side. Waikoloa has an awful lot of Inculin pools. On the Puna side, there's Pohiki. There was new Inculin pools actually discovered after the lava flow, the recent lava flow. And so what's unique about these is that they have all sorts of critters that some of whom have just evolved to live only in these ecosystems. And so they spend half of their time in the dark caves and crevices, and then they'll come up on these kind of like windows where there is more, where there's exposure to sunlight. And so you've got these bacterial mats as well as algae, microfilm algae. And so you'll have these, I like to call them the charismatic mini fauna of the Inculin pools, but the opaiula, or little red pond shrimp, live in these pools, and only these pools. There's 8 different types of them, one of which is endangered, but the most common one is not, but they're genetically distinct between pool systems. They're pretty awesome, and they're some of my favorite ecosystems. And I did have a picture in the first slide, so I can at least go to that and show you one of them.
And what the wildlife
if-
fund does is, what do you do? What does Wildlife Fund do to work on them? Are you mucking them out, or?
Yeah, thank you, Ilana. They're temporal systems, and they do fluctuate, and so over time they will fill in, but because of anthropogenic activity, primarily changes to the watershed up Malka and the introduction of invasive species, they are degrading at a faster rate. And so we are working hard to both remove aquatic invasive species like tilapia and guppies from these ecosystems, as well as some of the coastal vegetation that has come in, like of course grass, the seashore paspalum, because saltwater resistant, is kind of taking over, and even sometimes removing sediment with big old trash pumps from the bottom of these pools to try to restore them back to a flourishing environment where there's still dissolved oxygen and the various critters can survive.
Excellent. I have one last question, which is because a lot of these folks are just about to graduate or just about to transfer to UH Hilo. Congratulations to those of you who are, by the way. I always like to ask presenters, what do you like and what do you find challenging about your career? If for folks who are still, thinking about a career path, what is working in this field that you love and what is not?
Okay. Well, I love that when we're not forced to only work from home, a big chunk of what I do is outside. So when I'm working for Hawaii Wildlife Fund, we're out there working in the local, we're pulling weeds in the Inculin pools, or the fish ponds, or we're pulling pollution from the shoreline. We're monitoring some of these environmental variables, and that's great. And that's rewarding to spend time in Mother Nature, which is what we're trying to protect to begin with. What I don't like as much is probably, that's a really good question. It's hard. For example, when I also work for the state and we're doing a lot of monitoring of marine resources and water, it's really hard to see environmental degradation and impacts from climate change firsthand. And it was kind of like a wham bam in 2015 when we're getting more and more news of rapid ohia death, taking out our ohia in forests, and then a lot of our cauliflower coral was bleaching out up to 90% as well in certain areas. And so that's really hard. It's hard to work in a field in conservation. It's always 2 steps forward and 1 step back, it seems like, especially if you're working in the policy realm. And so you just got to be patient and persistent. It's hard to see the fruits of your labor after one day. You do with the beach cleanup, that large scale changes and to document change do take time and persistence. So if you have a very short attention span, it can be hard. You got to be in it kind of for the long haul.
Great, that's a wonderful answer. Oh, one more question. Where are the Inculin ponds found in ancient Hawaii, or was this a relatively new ecosystem?
Yeah, no, they were. So they're not unique to Hawaii. There are Inculin ecosystems around the world, and a lot of places like in Europe and other places like Mexico, for example, they are more cave systems. So in Mexico, they're called like cenotes. And in Hawaii, they were found here just because of the porous nature of our lava rock. The lava has like lava tubes and tunnels and cracks and crevices. This allows for these ecosystems to sort of become, to be created. Yeah, it's like I was mentioning the Pohiki flow in Leilani area. Like they found the biologists are in Hilo have already found several new Inculin pools, and some of which already have shrimp. And so they've been able to connect. And so these are not new ecosystems, but they're newer than, in like the reason that we have the most on this island, for example, is that things are filling up and those connections between the ocean and these pools are breaking down over the years. So there's less on Maui, and there's even less as you move up the chain. The ones on Oahu are based out of karst, out of like the limestone, like old skeletons of our coral reef, whereas the ones on this island are from the basalt lava rock. So they're changing and they're constantly evolving. Wetlands in general are a type of wetlands. They're just very unique. So great question, Kanani. Yeah, they're super special.
All right. If anybody has any last questions for Megan? All right. Let's go ahead and give her another round of applause. Oh, I have to unmute you. Let's give her another round of applause.
Thanks, y'all. That was fun.
Notice that she's put
Appreciate your time.
That was good.
Chat. So there's contact information in the chat box. Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, keep in touch. You guys should follow us on Instagram and so on and so forth. Keep in touch. We'd love to have you join us in some way, shape, or form, be involved in your future projects. So, appreciate you showing up.
Really appreciate it. Okay.
Ilana, thank you.